Hi, welcome to our latest installment of Grocery COVID-19 Live, brought to you by the staff of Winsight Grocery Business and our friend and mentor, supermarket guru Phil Lempert. I'm Meg Major, VP of Content for Winsight Grocery Business, coming at you live from Pittsburgh to kick things off with first by welcoming my two co-hosts this afternoon, John Springer, our executive editor from New York, and our Chicago-based content manager, Kat Martin. Also, of course, the man who needs no introduction, Phil Lempert. Before tossing it to Phil, I'd like to share a compelling statistic to help set the stage for today's segment. More than 3/4 of the US population have been ordered to stay at home. Supermarkets have been the constant in the grocery gone wild world in which we now live, but they're also, frankly, a little wild themselves, considering the gravity of COVID-19 that has set consumers flocking to grocery stores to stock up on food. Phil, please jump in and tell us something about what's caught your eye about consumer behavior this week.
Well, thanks, Meg. And that compelling stat that 3/4 of Americans have now been, quote unquote, ordered to stay home is really important because what we're starting to see is a lot of changes taking place. A lot of food service trucks on the street selling directly to consumers since they don't have restaurants to sell to. Also, little groups like clustering. We're definitely seeing that more in California. The beaches now have been closed, no question about it. But there's still a bike path which is loaded with people that are not keeping that 6-foot distance. We've also, just a programming note, we've expanded our Facebook Live COVID-19 webcast to twice a week. Look for our next episode at the same time, 12:30 Eastern on this Thursday. And don't worry if you miss an episode. They're all archived on the Winsight Grocery Business and Supermarket Guru Facebook pages, our YouTube channels, and our websites. Looking at the sales of last week, according to both Nielsen and Catalina, the category, and I think that everybody's going to get a chuckle out of this, that increased the most was, of all things, baking yeast. Forget hoarding of toilet paper. I guess that's over. What that indicates to me with baking yeast is that more people are home, more people are baking. They're bored maybe, or they can't find the baked goods in the store that they want, or that they're baking with kids to keep them entertained and hopefully teaching them some baking skills. Meg, I know you're looking at meat in depth, especially with Easter coming up. What are you seeing?
Well, certainly feel the fresh meat department has been the star attraction in all supermarkets from coast to coast and has served as the power lever for the store perimeter to record-setting levels throughout the past month, as pandemic pantry building shoppers have been buying food not only in a rush to get what they can, but also because they're feeding their families and their teenagers and their extended families 3 meals a day, which is very unusual that no one is able to get to the store or to a restaurant at will. So you've really got to stock up. And it also really makes me wonder how retailers and their trading partners will ever be able to really look at their worlds through the same eyes after seeing a 91% sales increase in the average meat department for the week ending March 22nd, which is absolutely staggering. That from IRI, alongside volume sales gains of 78%. The crazy fresh meat sales numbers from March 22nd, the week, are above and beyond also surges we've seen in the earlier weeks to the tune of 77% during the week of March 15th. Meat sales, we're told, in independents and regionals have been especially strong, with consumer demand far exceeding the offerings available on any given day in the past month. Sources have also told us that some independents are seeing roughly a 600% gain in their fresh meat sales over the norm. Warehouses have been at double volumes, sales have been tripling, and had there been more product in many stores and a wider window to plan, those gains would have even been larger. So as we begin to see things finally leveling off, it is happening in some but not all markets. And I'd like to turn to John and ask John, what kind of things have you been seeing in terms of helping retailers keeping their stores and associates safe?
Yeah, thanks, Meg. It's a crazy situation that's evolving every week. We're seeing, at first we saw uh, great crowds of shoppers in stores, very tightly packed, everybody waiting in. Then they realized, well, we've got a social distance now. How are we gonna enforce that? So in the last week, we've now seen stores that are limiting the number of folks inside at one time. That's creating lines outside of the store. So now they've got to go and create social distance, outside of the store. You got to give them credit. They're working very quickly to do this, and these are big operational changes that are complicated to execute, and they're happening at thousands of stores across the country, just like that. But it's just one thing after another. Here, the latest we're seeing, this morning, I wrote about how Walmart was now taking the temperature of all of their employees as they enter the store and sending them home if they've got a temperature of 100 or above, telling them not to come back for work for 3 days. These are measures that they've got to take in order to keep their workers safe and slow the spread of this disease, which at some point it's going to kind of catch up to some folks in the industry, and it's a dangerous and it's a scary situation.
Yeah, and John, just to add to that, I know Bueller's has been doing that for a while, and I think that was a directive from the state of Ohio that they wanted all employees the temperatures of their staff, or employers, I should say, taking the temperature of their staff as they come in. And just, I know a ton of retailers are doing this, but I happened to be in Target last week, and I noticed they had signs posted at the checkout, reminding customers to stand back, and they had blue lines at the checkout lane saying, here's your 6 feet. And when I was in line, I actually heard one of the cashiers say, ma'am, can you please step back to the line? You're too close. So, employees are kind of stepping up to say, back a little bit. And then in the aisles, the X's to mark out the 6 feet. So, I think there's just a lot of things retailers are doing. And I noticed one retailer last week also, an IGA in Pennsylvania was noticing a lot of New Jersey plates in his parking lot. So he started taking the temperatures of customers. So I don't know if that's something that's going to be spread. I don't think that's something that, Americans might take to. I know they were doing that a lot in China, but who knows? We're kind of in the Wild West here for what's going on. And, I know Woodman's, to help kind of keep that social distancing, they've gone to a single check lane. So everybody stands in one lane with the lines marked, and then, they're called up to the checkout. So there's just a lot of stuff going on. Harmon's is handing out free thermometers through their pharmacy drive-through. So there's just, crazy stuff happening that you wouldn't have thought of 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. And also, Kat, one of the things that I saw the other day is that CVS and Walgreens is now allowing food pickup through their drive-through that is normally reserved for pharmacy.
Yeah. It's crazy. And also, states are stepping. I mentioned Ohio saying, check the temperature of your employees. Rhode Island has actually said retailers have to enforce social distancing when they're within their stores, and they have to only allow 20% of the fire capacity in the stores at one time. So that means they do have to have employees at the doors, manning, making sure, like back in the day when you used to go to a club and, so many people in, so many people. So now you have to do that at a grocery store.
Yeah. So we're going to go back to that era of Studio 54.
Yeah.
in grocery.
Meg, just to get some produce.
Exactly. Meg, what other related virus coverage have you guys been heavily covering that you're really focused on, that can help grocers, that can help food service operators, that can help C-store operators?
So one of the biggest things we've been covering in the past 3 weeks has been the heroism that has been displayed by the frontline teams and, frankly, by their executive teams, who've stepped up to reward on all rungs of the organization and warehouse and headquarters, et cetera, to really thank them in the ways of meaningful ways, of bonuses and of pay raises. So I think that, these things have just been a continuation of grocers not being able to appropriately thank their frontline teams sufficiently. And to that end, John, if you could please provide a rundown of how you see these efforts translating in the longer term.
Yeah, thanks, Meg. It seems like the retailers kind of follow one another, and you kind of follow the leaders. And really, if you kind of get back to the beginning of this, it's more or less 10% salary increases, whether that's paid in bonus or paid in per hour rates, across the board. Now, we've seen, just this week, we've been writing about some worker uprisings at, the crowdsourced delivery group, Instacart, as well as what they're calling is going on today, a quote unquote sick out at Whole Foods markets. It's unclear exactly how much support they're getting from the workers. With a gig job, it's really hard to tell. And these guys are also all in the process of hiring thousands of workers as well. So it's kind of the effects might not be immediately apparent, and the delivery services like Instacart are already jammed up to begin with. So it's hard to tell if there's been any kind of serious disruption in the service. I think the workers that were behind this were also kind of counting on consumers to kind of join with them and boycott. But so we've seen that, this week, Sprouts Farmers Markets, which earlier a week ago announced that they would pay their quarterly bonus to employees early, and as though all stores met their goals, came back this week and said, well, that actually shortchanged certain workers, so they're going to give out a second bonus that'll try to make those guys whole. So yeah, it's a struggle all around, right? They're hiring, they're paying more, they're going through all these operations issues. They're probably dealing with a lot more absenteeism than they would normally have. They've got to adjust their benefit programs to care for sick workers. So it's really been a strain on supermarkets all around, and they've really been working hard.
So, John, let me ask you something, not only just about Instacart, but all the delivery services. So when we read these headlines in the newspapers, consumers reading these headlines, are we going to scare people away from grocery delivery? Because what the headlines are saying is these workers don't feel that they are given the right protection, that they're not given gloves, that they're not given masks. So it's twofold. It's from a safety standpoint, their personal safety, as well as from a financial standpoint. As we talked about last week, I'm not sure who's going to pay for all this. And I can only imagine all the CFOs of all the retailers are sitting there just, with their calculators going nuts. But what kind of effect do you think this is going to have on consumers?
Yeah, I mean, I'm asking the same question myself. And, what I've been hearing generally is that although there are issues with getting your deliveries as promptly as you would normally get if you were doing e-commerce during this time, and, stores are blown out of toilet paper, and, these other kind of minor annoyances that are getting into shoppers, I think that shoppers are seeing that as a side effect of this pandemic and not necessarily a systemic issue with supermarkets or e-commerce or how they want to, fulfill people's offers. I think that message is coming through, but it's a good question, Phil, because, if you've got some people who are trying, home delivery for the first time or e-commerce for the first time, and they can't get a delivery for 6 weeks or 3 weeks anyway, and half the things you order have to be substituted on their way over, maybe that doesn't make the impression that these guys would like.
So we're seeing a lot of changes obviously taking place. And I want to go back to two things that was said before. First, Meg, you brought up a really interesting point that I had not thought of. Now that people are home and people are making 3 meals a day, are we going to be moving away from the trend that we've seen of snacking, where people have been eating, 9 times a day because they're at work? Are we going to go back to the normal 3 square meals a day?
That remains to be seen. I can't imagine Americans' love of snacking changing very much. But I do think that a lot of us, our grocery bills have skyrocketed. But the same token, those dollars haven't been being spent elsewhere. If anything, it might bring a balance back to a little bit more wholesome eating and a little bit of the joy of cooking, as you're talking about. But I also think there's going to be such pent up demand for people who have been stuck in the kitchens and the cleanups and the so forth. So I can see a lot of people also fleeing and saying, just let me eat out again every meal, because I've been stuck in my kitchen feeding my family, and I'm ready to, switch it up a little bit.
And
just
one of the
also,
other, sorry.
oh, go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, no, one of the other things that I'm wondering, and we're not going to know, is with all these people now eating at home, are they going to get fatter? Or, because of basically when you go into the store, not everything that you want is there. So you're making some compromises. Instead of that lean cuisine pizza, you might be buying a different kind of frozen pizza that's not lean cuisine. And I'm just wondering what's going to happen to the caloric intake of these people when they're at home as well. Yet to be determined.
And on top of that, you figure it's going to give people an opportunity to, honestly, whether by force or just no other option, to try different brands.
Absolutely.
If people are very brand loyal to a certain thing, it's really forced people to say, let's experiment. But I really do agree too, all the comfort food that so many people, if you really stop and look in what's going into baskets, it's not fully healthy, but it's still home cooked meals. So it's kind of been really cool to see just on a sideline basis. Kat, what were you thinking?
Yeah.
I was just going to say, anecdotally, from what I've seen and heard from my friends, the snacking is not going away. One friend, she has 2 kids at home, and she's like, they are eating me out of house and home. So
sure.
I think the snacking is still going to continue. And like Phil had mentioned, we're all going to really need to hit the gym when this is all over.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other point I want to go back to is something that John talked about as far as the distancing. And for those of our viewers who remember Lucky Stores here in Southern California, Larry Del Santo, who was the president at the time, his license plate for his car was "Three's a Crowd." And what Lucky did is their premise was, if there was more than 3 people at a checkout, they would automatically open up another checkout. And I'm just wondering if with this whole distancing, if we're going to go back to retailers who might have, 12, 15 check stands, of which normally half are closed, finally up the game and say, hey, you know something? Besides distancing, maybe it's time that we don't have such long lines at checkouts.
Yeah, that's a good point. I remember Three's a Crowd. What I'd say is, I mean, what we've heard so far is companies, kind of might be looking at this longer term as the kind of event that's going to speed the adoption of contactless checkout. Whether it's on your phone or the Amazon Go type stores, those kinds of things. I know that some of the software companies that are offering that now are offering it free to retailers to check it out. And I know Fairway Markets here in New York, we're using a company called Future Proof Retail to do a check free. And they, Fairway said, hey, guess what? This is going to help promote social distancing, and their usage and app use went up 30% or something. So, I think that's one thing. There's a lot of kind of long-term changes that'll probably come about from this issue that we really got to think through. Checkout just being one of them.
Let's move over to food. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, to John's point, I know one of the things it deals with checkout, and that's the shields that a lot of grocers have put up between the cashiers and the customers. And I was talking to Tim Metcalf yesterday, and he had originally put up, the standard 4-foot shield, and then he extended it to the whole check lane. And And he's like, I really like the way that looks. And he's like, I think that's going to be something that sticks around. So that might be, something else where they're going to continue to maintain that distance, because let's face it, we're all going to be germaphobes for a while. So.
Right. Just to build on that and going back to something that Meg kicked us off with, not only are we going to see a lot of changes, but when the food industry wants to move quickly, it can. And those plexiglass shields are a perfect example. I mean, 3 weeks ago, nobody had them. And then we start to see the announcements, and within 2 to 3 weeks, thousands and thousands of stores have them. So, good for the plexiglass industry,
Right.
matter of fact. But it really points out that when there's a need, we can move quickly, and we can probably point to between the four of us, 100 things that the food industry should be doing, the grocery industry should be doing, but they just haven't gotten to it yet. But just to reinforce that. In fact, Kat, I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk about food service, how grocers and food service cohorts, are working together to make the best of a really horrible situation.
Yeah, I mean, our poor food service partners are really feeling the brunt of this. But for years, there's been this blurring of lines between grocery retailers and food service. And this event is blurring those lines even more. But I really like how the two parts of the industry are really coming together. The main goal is just to keep people fed, and they're really working together to do that. For example, Rouse's Markets in Louisiana, they're selling restaurant prepared meals from local restaurants out of their food service department. And those restaurants get to keep all the proceeds. So the store is just essentially saying, they're coming here anyway. Let's remind them that this restaurant does offer, takeout, and we can do it through our stores. And NGA and United Fresh have partnered up to put produce distributors in direct contact with stores, so they can say, what do you need? We can't really service that many restaurants anymore. We have this product that needs to go somewhere. Let me send it to your store. And other, food service distributors are working with grocery retailers in order to keep that product line moving. Because as we know, grocery is getting really hard hit now, because everybody's taking their one trip that they can take is to the grocery store and buying all the food that they need for the family of 4 for 3 meals a day, the snacking they're doing. So they're really turning to those food service distributors to help keep that.
And I'd like to go back to your Rouse's example, because not only do I think it's great that they're doing it and helping the restaurant, but the point of it is that they're not charging the restaurant. What do you think is going to happen? Because over the past few weeks before this, lots of controversy about, the 20-30% that Seamless, that Grubhub was taking retailers or food service restaurants, really complaining about that. And again, here in Santa Monica, what a lot of the restaurants are doing is they're doing takeout themselves, so that they're not having to pay that 20 or 30%. Do you think that this is going to change the model in two ways? Number one, that supermarkets start selling restaurant food from named restaurants, co-branding, if you would. And number two, is this going to put a big dent into the world of delivery for Grubhub and Seamless?
Yeah, I really don't know. I mean, we're so in the early stages of this, and this is going to continue on, for several weeks, maybe months. So I don't really know how the dust is going to settle. I think people are going to get used to some conveniences that they might not be willing to give up. Whether or not they're going to be willing to continue to pay for those, I don't know. Also, I really wonder what's going to happen to some of our food service partners, some restaurants that have been really hit hard. A lot of them are turning to becoming mini groceries themselves. So again, there's that push-pull that grocery and food service has always had, where you have, I know like Frisch's Big Boy has turned into mini markets. They had been kind of a takeout concept, and they're supplying everything from produce and bread to toilet paper. So, are they going to continue to be a mini market, or are they going to go back to being a strictly restaurant? I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out through the summer when hopefully things start to kind of settle back down and business starts to return to normal.
Hopefully. So, look out for our next episode, same time, 12:30 Eastern this Thursday. Meg, what's on our list for next week?
Phil, what we're going to look at next episode will be prices and promotions and how retailers are going to be making adjustments or to their whole operations in terms of that. We're also going to take a look at some of the things we talked about earlier, but didn't have too big of a chance to get into, the unexpected changes that have taken place, what will stick, what will go away, and maybe what we think should stick. And the third would be simply the digital investments that many retailers have made in the past year and a half, rapidly, that might have to be scuttled or scrapped or at least tabled indefinitely.
Yeah, because somebody's got to pay for all that plexiglass.
That's for sure.
Meg, thanks a lot. And thank you for watching. Stay safe and stay separated.
Thank you, Phil.
And Tony, we're clear? No problem. Yep. And sorry about two things